Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 10 of Money and Stuff. Hope you guys are all doing good. I'm your host, Sam Rodriguez, certified financial planner. With me is my co-host, Conor Shepard. Conor, man, how are you doing?
Doing good, Sam. Got a coffee brewing and just another day in paradise.
Yeah, we got to make it. I know we usually do these things in the afternoon. We usually record in the afternoon. We're recording first thing in the morning. You gonna make it through this one?
Of course. I mean, I probably the only reason I might be so tired is because I was so excited knowing like, wow, first thing in the morning.
I cannot wait to continue talking about Roth IRAs. So let's continue our discussion about Roth IRAs, right? Last time we talked about being able to put money to a Roth IRA, who's eligible to put money to a Roth IRA. So today, let's talk about Roth IRA conversions and other ways that if you exceed the income limit that the IRS has set in order to be able to contribute to a Roth IRA, how you can still put money into a Roth IRA. I think that would be a really good thing for us to cover today.
Yeah, definitely. And before we really dig into it, I think it might be important for people to understand really why it's so important to convert or contribute to a Roth IRA. Do you think we could run through that real quick?
Yeah, that's a good point, man. So I think as investors, people tend to hear the word diversification a lot, right? But when we hear the word diversification, we think of it as what we're invested in. Mm-hmm. But a key component that I see a lot of people miss, and I see a lot of advisors miss with their clients, is tax diversification. So what I mean by tax diversification is having your accounts set up in a way where when you begin to draw income in retirement, they're not all taxed the same way. So the majority of people have all of their money in their 401k or traditional IRA. And the issue there, and not that that's bad, but the issue is if you're pulling a significant amount of money out of there every year, that money is fully taxable. Mm-hmm. And whatever amount you pull out, it's sort of taxed the same way as a paycheck. Mm-hmm. So if you're pulling a significant amount out, you could be in a very high tax bracket and lose a lot of your money to taxes. Yeah. And something I always tell clients is, in retirement, especially, I see taxes as worse than market losses. Mm-hmm. Because a market loss, we can come back from, we can do something about it. But once we pay taxes, that money is gone.
Yeah.
That money cannot continue. Yeah. That money cannot continue working for you. It is gone. So the more we can do to reduce your tax liability in retirement, the longer we can make your money last. Mm-hmm. And so, for example, let's say a married filing joint couple that is pulling out $100,000 from their retirement accounts. When I've done the math on it, someone who is pulling it only from taxable accounts, like a 401k, a pension, stuff like that, they're going to pay about $7,000 more per year than someone that has a tax diversified strategy. Mm-hmm. Right? So that's 7% of the entire 100,000 that they pull out. Mm-hmm. That's a lot of money, right? That's money that could stay in the accounts, that could continue to grow, or it's just extra income they could have on an annual basis. So a tax diversified strategy is very important, and a Roth IRA or some sort of tax-free income is an important, very, very key / important part of that tax diversified strategy. Mm-hmm. You got any other questions? Was that good enough?
Absolutely. I mean, hey, let me just pull out my booklet of questions.
So I think it's important. I think today what we'll do is cover three main things. One is how do we sort of sidestep those Roth IRA income limits that the IRS has set? Right? Which are, how do you still contribute to a Roth IRA? Do you have other options besides a Roth IRA for tax-free money? And let's also talk about maybe who it's not a good idea for to do some sort of Roth conversion, right? So How do you get money into a Roth, right? Which I'm going to talk about the possibility of using your 401k. I'm going to talk about what's called a backdoor Roth IRA. And then I'm also going to talk about converting traditional IRA money to a Roth IRA.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that last point will be good to go through, just because I think it's easy for people to see this and think, wow, who wouldn't want to be setting up a form of tax-free income or a form of, tax-free revenue? But there are going to be situations that the Roth isn't necessarily the best option for you or the best decision for you.
Yeah, there are definitely times where it just doesn't make sense. And I'll go through an example that I had recently of that I was sharing with you the other day. So I'll start with what the issue is and why I'm talking about Roth conversions and backdoor Roth IRAs is for people who are making a really good income, right? That is single filers, or I should say single tax filers that are making near $125,000 a year, or married filing jointly tax filers that are making near $198,000 a year. You may not be able to do a Roth IRA contribution because that's where, or those numbers are the thresholds where the IRS begins to say you cannot contribute to a Roth IRA. Right. And it's a little more nuanced than that. The true limits are 140 and 208. And it's, of course, of your modified adjusted gross income, which we talked about in the last episode. You can listen to episode 9 and hear more about that. But just know, single filer, 125,000, married filing jointly, 198,000. You are starting to hit those thresholds where maybe you cannot contribute to a Roth IRA. And I know a lot of you after the last episode are probably saying to yourself, hey, the Roth IRA sounds fantastic, but I've been told I make too much money to be able to contribute to one. And that may be true. But right now, there are some, I don't really like saying loopholes because that for some reason that has like a negative connotation to it. But I really don't know another way to say it. There's a few loopholes to allow you.
Advanced strategies.
Yeah, hey, there you go. There's a few advanced strategies that will allow you to still contribute to a Roth IRA. And the first one we can talk about is something called a backdoor Roth IRA. So here's how a backdoor Roth IRA works. Ideally, you would open a Roth IRA and you just contribute money to it the same way that you would to an IRA or your 401k and be done, right? Because of the income limitations, you may not be able to do that. But what you can do is you can contribute to a traditional IRA. You can then take the money that you contributed to your traditional IRA and have that converted to a Roth IRA. So the money would go from your traditional IRA to the Roth IRA. And now you, in effect, have done the same thing as if you would have been able to put the money directly into the Roth. Why that loophole exists and why you got to jump through those hoops makes no sense to me. In my mind, if they're going to allow you to do this strategy, just allow you to put it in directly. I don't know how much longer this will last. I actually read a headline this morning saying that they're talking about maybe closing this loophole.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So again, it doesn't make sense to me. Why, if you're going to let them do this through this strategy, just let them put it straight in there.
Yeah. It sounds like contributing to a Roth IRA with extra steps rather than it just be okay, you're putting money directly into it, put money over here. Now it's completely legit.
Yeah. It doesn't make any sense. It's like saying, hey, you can't come into my living room from the front door. I need you to first go through the back door and go to the kitchen. And then from the kitchen, you can come to my living room. The effect is still the same. You just got to do some unnecessary steps or what seem like unnecessary steps to get there. Hence, backdoor Roth IRA, right?
Yeah.
So something that's key to understand is when you do put money into the traditional IRA, that is typically going to be a tax deductible event,
Mhm.
right? And then when you take money out of your IRA, that is typically going to be a taxable event.
Mhm.
Now, one thing you need to understand is something called the Pro-Rata Rule, which I know I tried to explain to you the other day and did a terrible job of it. So I'm gonna try to do it better for our listeners. So, like I said, when you put money into your traditional IRA, it's typically a tax deductible event. And then when you take the money out, it is going to be a taxable event. But those two events may wipe each other out, right?
Mhm. All right.
So the pro rata rule, I'm going to cheat a little bit, and I actually looked it up to try to on the internet try to find an easy way to explain it. So I'm just going to read it straight off this website. I'm going to cite nerdwallet.com so that way I don't get in any sort of trouble. Here's the pro rata rule according to nerdwallet.com. So the IRS requires rollovers from traditional IRAs to Roth IRAs to be done what's called pro rata, right? Here's how that works. So when determining what your tax bill is on a conversion from a traditional IRA to a Roth IRA, the IRS is going to look at all of your traditional IRA accounts combined. So I'm going to talk about that for a minute. If you only have one IRA and that IRA has nothing in it, and you put money into this IRA solely for the purpose of converting it to the Roth, you do not have to worry about the pro rata rule. It will not come into effect. But if you have a existing IRA that already has some money in it,
Mhm.
this is when the pro rata rule is going to come into effect. So the IRS, when they're looking at your conversion, they're looking at all of your IRA accounts aggregated.
Okay.
Notice I said IRA accounts. I'm not talking about your 401k, but IRA accounts. So it continues. So the IRS is going to look at all of your traditional IRA accounts combined. If all of your traditional IRA accounts combined consist of, say, 70% pre-tax and 30% after tax, 30% after tax being the money you just put in for the purposes of converting, the ratio determines what percentage of the money you convert to a Roth that is going to be taxable, so that you're actually going to be taxed on, and that they're not going to be offsetting events to where you don't owe taxes. So in this example, no matter how much money you convert or which IRA account you pull the money from, 70% of the amount you convert to the Roth will be taxable because it was pre-existing. So you can't choose to convert only the money you just put in. You have to do it pro rata, and it has to be done in a ratio from the new money you just put in and the money that was already existing. So a word about timing, it says the IRS applies the pro rata rule to your total IRA balance at year end, not at the time of conversion. Make sense?
I think so. Yeah.
I think so. Doesn't make me feel confident. I'll say this. If anybody has questions about the pro rata rule, email me info@Foundation Wealth Partners or Rodriguez at Foundation Wealth Partners, and I'll explain it. I'll get on a Zoom with you. It's much easier for me to explain if I'm able to, draw things out for you. It makes a little more sense. But I think pro rata rule, I'm getting a little sidetracked. I just wanted to make sure for those of you who have an existing IRA and want to try doing this backdoor Roth IRA strategy, you really need to be aware of the pro rata rule. That's my main point.
Yeah.
So other ways that you can do this, you can just convert some of your existing IRA to a Roth, right? You don't have to do it this backdoor Roth IRA way. You can actually just say, hey, I have some IRA money already. Let's go ahead and convert it to a Roth IRA. That process is simple. You go to the institution where you already have your IRA set up, get a Roth IRA set up, and then every institution has some paperwork or a process to convert money from an IRA to a Roth. Here's what I need to tell you about that, though. It is super simple to do. However, what you don't want to do is just say, hey, I got a lot of money in this IRA. It'd be great if it was tax-free later. What you have to know about that conversion is every dollar that you convert from a traditional IRA to a Roth IRA is going to be taxable in the year that you do the conversion.
Mhm.
If you make too much money to contribute to a Roth IRA directly, then you're making a pretty good income and you're probably in a pretty high tax bracket already. Even if you're not in that high of a tax bracket, let's say that you have $250,000 in a traditional IRA and you want to convert it to a Roth. If you're making $125,000 and you now convert your $250,000 IRA, in the eyes of the IRS, they're going to combine those two numbers, everything that you converted plus your income, right? So 250 plus 125, and it's going to look like you make $375,000.
Mhm.
They're going to tax you like you made $375,000. It could possibly push you into a really high tax bracket, and you would probably pay more taxes now than you would if you had just left it in a traditional IRA and started making withdrawals in retirement. So one of the things that we do with clients, and one of the things that I encourage you to do, is to look at what tax bracket you're in. And instead of doing big conversions all at once, do smaller conversions every year,
Mhm.
paying attention to what tax bracket you're in and not converting an amount that would push you into a higher tax bracket.
Yeah.
Right. So making sure that any conversions you made would be taxed at the current bracket that you're in. So that way you don't end up in a situation where you have a much higher tax bill than you expected.
Yeah. So really it sounds like, well, I mean, what do we say pretty much every episode? It depends on your situation.
Right.
But it sounds like rather than just looking at it as a one size solution, just a one-off time that you do one conversion, it seems like it's more of a continue looking at your situation, keeping up with where you are in your tax bracket and adjusting your contribution or conversion rather accordingly. Is that?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And this goes for whether you're working or whether you're already retired even, right? Because you can do this to lower your tax bill later, even if you're already retired. So I'll talk about a few examples. So first of all, exactly what you said. Every year you need to look at your situation, look at the income that's coming in, look at what's going to be taxable income, look at where you're going to fall. So look at what tax bracket you're going to fall into and do some planning as to how much should I convert this year? And it does require work. It does require planning to decide and figure that out. So I'd encourage you to either work with your CPA or work with your financial advisor to work with you on that. And make sure when you're working with a CPA or a financial advisor that they understand you're trying to make sure that you don't push yourself into a higher tax bracket. The other thing you want to make sure of is that it even makes sense to do the conversion. Because if you're making a really good income, you may be in a 34% tax bracket, but you're already going to be in a much lower tax bracket in retirement, say like the 12% tax bracket in retirement. If that's the case, why would we convert something and pay 34% tax when we're only going to be taxed at 12% in retirement, right? So those are discussions you need to have with your CPA or your financial advisor to see if it really makes sense for you to do. Now, the reason I say that even if you're retired, it's not too late is, let's say you retire at 60 or 65. With the way things are trending, people are living longer and longer. You could live 20 to 30 years in retirement, right? So if we spent the first 10 years doing some conversions and maybe paying slightly more taxes than we would if we weren't doing conversions, then that may mean the last 20 years of your retirement, we could put you in a much, much lower tax bracket and save you more money in the long run. Again, these are all it depends situations. These are situations where you got to sit down with your financial advisor or your CPA, take a look at it and run the projections and figure out, does this make sense for me to do? But my main point being, even if you're almost at retirement or already in retirement, it still makes sense to take a look at. So another way, a much easier way if you make too much income to directly contribute to a Roth IRA, is to look at your 401k. Not all 401ks offer this, but I'm seeing more and more 401ks offer a Roth option within the 401k. So here's the great thing about Roth options in a 401k. There are absolutely no income limits to your ability to contribute to the Roth 401k. So if that's available, then we really don't have to worry about doing anything crazy. We don't have to worry about your income. You just either call them, go on their website, your 401k's website, whatever it is, and change your contributions, right? You can even split it between the pre-tax and the Roth option. So that way you can begin to put money into the Roth IRA. But again, this is something that you really need to work with your advisor and your CPA on to determine what that ratio should be, because it's a balance between getting the tax deduction today with the pre-tax money and lowering your taxes in the future with the Roth IRA or Roth 401k options. So that's probably the easiest way to do it if you're making too much money. So I think we should talk about who does this not make sense for?
Yeah.
Right. So I would say for the conversion aspect is where you really need to watch out. If you're going to have to pay taxes when you do the Roth IRA conversion, you need to have a way to pay those taxes. And if you don't have any other way to pay those taxes except for pulling money from the traditional IRA, it's probably not a good idea to do. You need to have some money available in some other account that is not going to be a big tax hit or increase your tax liability that you can access to pay the taxes.
Yeah.
Right. No, it's a taxable event. No, you're going to have to come up with some money to pay those taxes. If you're going to need that money in less than 5 years, you probably should reconsider whether or not it makes sense. Again, this is an area where you need to work with your financial advisor, because there are some rules to these conversions of when you can use the money after you've made the conversion. There's a 5-year rule that there's some nuances to it depending on how you put money into your Roth IRA. So that, again, another reason why it's important to talk with your advisor about it. But the 5-year rule tends to go across all of the different options that you have. So 5 years, that money, you need to sort of know that you probably don't need to touch the money for 5 years. Otherwise, there may be some penalties involved. If it's going to push you into a much higher tax bracket, or you're going to end up paying a lot more taxes, and maybe this is not a good idea to do. And I would say the main factor, which is going to require you to do some work to figure out if this is you or not, but the main factor is doing some projections and figuring out what your tax liability in retirement is going to be compared to your tax liability. So it all boils down to trying to pay less taxes. And what you want to work out is, when does it make the most sense to pay taxes? So when do I do this so that way I pay lower taxes than I would later on when I'm actually utilizing this money, when I'm pulling it from the accounts, right?
Okay.
You can't just think about it 1 year at a time. You have to think about it over your lifetime.
Yeah.
So the example that I was telling you about the other day, I had a friend tell me that they knew someone who told them that they were going to convert all of their IRA money to a Roth IRA. They attended one of these seminars put on by a financial advisor, where they come and they share an idea and try to get you to work with them. And it was all about taxes and Roth IRA. And somehow this couple came away from that believing that they needed to convert every bit of their IRA to a Roth IRA before they retire, which may be true. But I asked a few more questions, and this couple is not retired yet. So they're still working. So they still have a pretty good income. They have a sizable amount in their Roth IRA. So if they convert, they're going to be in like the mid 30s in terms of their percentage of tax liability, right? Tax bracket is what I was trying to say, as compared to if they just took the withdrawals later on in retirement, they'd probably be in a 22% tax bracket or lower. So they're exchanging an extremely high tax bracket for tax-free, but they're going to lose over a third of their money just in taxes right off the bat.
Yeah.
Right. So a better strategy for someone like that to do, again, would be to look at their situation every year and say, how much should we convert?
Yeah. Well, I think overall what it sounds like is converting to a Roth, contributing to a Roth, a lot of benefits, a lot of tax benefits, obviously, and it seemingly has minimal downsides in a lot of ways, but it is still a situational decision that you need to be willing to look at and assess on a yearly basis. Like you said, it's something that, yes, it can be beneficial or it can be a positive improvement to your financial situation, but it is still situational.
That's right. It is. And it is not just situational, specifically to you. It is situational specifically to you and this current year.
Mm-hmm.
So just because it's right for you or isn't right for you this year doesn't mean the same thing is going to apply next year. So every year is a new situation and you need to look at it. One last thing I do want to talk about. Some of you may have heard the term mega backdoor Roth IRA. So I'm going to try to explain that. Again, this is where I wish I had a whiteboard that everybody could see. So first, I want everybody to keep the number 58,000 in mind. And that number specifically is for 2021. Check your 401k and see if there's something called an after-tax non-Roth contribution. So you'll see pre-tax, you'll see Roth, and then maybe you'll see after-tax. So here's what you need to know. Normally in your 401k, you have a limit of either 19,500 if you're 49 or younger, or 26,000 that you have the ability to contribute to your 401k. You actually have the ability to contribute much more if there is an after-tax non-Roth option. So here's where that 58,000 comes into play. Take 58,000 and subtract whatever your contribution is. So let's say you're contributing the max 26,000. Let's say you're 56 old, you contribute 26,000. Okay. 26 from 58 takes you to 32, right? Now, your silence is making me think my math may be off. Is my math correct?
No, it's correct.
36 or 26? Yes, that's 32.
Yes.
So now we're at 32. Now we have to subtract out whatever your company put in for you. So if you have a company match, how much did they put in for you? Let's say that they, for easy math's sake, let's say that they put $10,000 in for you. So let's subtract that 10,000 from the 32. So now we're left with 22. You have $22,000 that you can put additional money in as long as it goes into the after-tax non-Roth contribution, right? So your total contributions between you and the company putting money in for you, the limit is 58,000. But that limit doesn't mean you can just put in 58,000. Part of that 58,000 is you're limited to the either 19,500 or 26,000, depending on your age. Then so subtract that from the 58, then subtract out whatever the match is from the company or whatever the company put in for you. And then that's what you can contribute to hit all the way up to the 58. Here's the key. Right now, you are allowed to take that after-tax non-Roth contribution and convert it to a Roth IRA.
Okay.
The only part that is taxable is any growth that happens. Because it was after-tax money, you're not going to be taxed on the movement of your principal from the after-tax non-Roth to the Roth, but you will be taxed on any gains that it made, right? So the sooner you make the transfer, the less likelihood you're going to have of having a taxable event because there's less time for it to grow. So that is one way that you can really, really sort of super fund a Roth IRA without there really being much tax consequence.
Yeah.
Not really having to do a conversion from pre-tax to after tax, right? So go check your 401k. You can probably log in online, go to the contribution options and see if they offer just an after tax. When I say after tax, I don't mean the Roth. I mean an after tax non-Roth contribution. If you have the ability to do that, then you can super fund a Roth IRA.
Okay.
So that's it. We may go more into that mega backdoor Roth IRA. I will say that's another sort of loophole that they're trying to close, right? I think as advisors, we find these different ways that we can help clients with these things in tax law. And then as they get more and more popular, they sort of come in the crosshairs of the government and they say, hey, hold on. You're right. This doesn't make sense that we allow you to do this. But instead of just allowing you to do it, we're just going to cut it out, you know? So there's an opportunity to do that right now. If you have extra money on a monthly basis that you wish you could be saving somewhere and you wish that it could go into an after-tax bucket, that's a great way to start. That's a great place to start. Not every 401k offers that after-tax contribution, but if it does, it's a fantastic option. Or I should say, it could be a fantastic option.
There you go.
The bottom line is having some after-tax money in retirement is great because it can help you lower your tax bill in retirement, which means your money's going to last a lot longer. However, everybody's situation is individual. Every situation is different from year to year. Deciding how you put money into a tax-free bucket like a Roth IRA is very dependent on your individual situation and your individual situation in that particular year. Whether you do a backdoor Roth IRA, whether you do a 401k Roth contribution or the mega backdoor Roth contribution or a Roth conversion from an IRA, you've got a lot of options. You need to work with somebody to figure out if it makes sense for your situation. Even if you think, hey, yeah, it does, it'd be better to check with somebody and make sure that it does.
Yeah.
All right, that's it, guys. Thanks for tuning in to episode 10, money and stuff. So 10 episodes in, we've only talked about money. One of these days, we'll talk about some stuff.
Hey, NFL just kicked off. Maybe we'll be able to find some fun games to talk about.
Maybe so. I'm embarrassed to say who I'm a fan of. Oh man. We'll get into it one day.
We don't want to lose any listeners when we're just getting started, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Guys, really appreciate you listening. For those of you who send questions in, we really appreciate it. So, wherever you're listening to us, wherever you're getting, your podcast, watching us on YouTube, listening to us on YouTube, whatever it is you're doing, we really appreciate it. Would love it if you hit subscribe, hit like, share it. We'd love to help as many people as possible and get this information out to as many people as possible. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, whatever that looks like. Until next time, guys, have a great one.
Securities offered through LPL Financial, member FINRA/SIPC. Investment advice offered through Foundation Wealth Partners, a DBA of Advisor Resource Council, a registered investment advisor. Foundation Wealth Partners and Advisor Resource Council are separate entities from LPL Financial. The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a decision. Individual tax and legal matters should be discussed with your tax or legal professional.